And tutor slams premature return of St. George's College amid flooding and safety concerns. Now for the details. Trinidad and Tobago is under a hot spell watch at the yellow level, with daily temperatures expected to reach or exceed 34 degrees Celsius in Trinidad and 33 degrees Celsius in Tobago over the next 5 days. The warning issued by the Trinidad and Tobago Meteorological Service remains in effect until 4 p.m. on Monday, September 23rd. Citizens are urged to stay hydrated, wear appropriate clothing, and limit outdoor activity during peak hours of 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Vulnerable groups such as elderly, children, and outdoor workers are advised to take extra precautions. The Ministry of Health and Animal Welfare groups have also issued guidelines to help people and pets stay safe in the extreme heat. The Trinbago Knight Riders faced a tough challenge against the Antigua and Barbuda Falcons in their CPL match at Queen's Park Oval, managing a modest 134 for 8 after being sent to bat. Captain Kieron Pollard led the effort with 47 runs from 37 balls, hitting 4 sixes and 2 fours. Pollard's partnerships with Tim David and Akil Hossain helped boost the total. The Falcons' Fabian Allen was key, with the ball taking 2 wickets for just 13 runs, including the dismissals of David and Andre Russell. West Indies cricket icons Kieron Pollard and Dinath Ramnarine have teamed up to launch Go Electric TT, an initiative aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions by encouraging corporate entities to switch to electric vehicles. The project, supported by the International Development Bank, aligns with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Pollard emphasized the importance of sustainability to secure a better future for the next generation, while the duo's investment in Blue Coast focuses on certified emissions, measurements, and decarbonization strategies. The initiative targets younger generations to lead the change in global sustainability efforts. The Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association has criticized the Ministry of Education for what it calls a premature decision to return students and staff to St. George's College in Barataria. Tutor President Martin Lumpkin says the school remains unfit for occupation due to unresolved infrastructural issues, including flooding caused by recent heavy rains. Teachers staged a walkout on September 18th, protesting the inadequate repairs. Despite the ministry's claim that flooding was unrelated to the recent roof work, Lumpkin says drainage problems have worsened due to the roof's guttering system. He also cited high classroom temperatures and mosquito infestations as ongoing issues. Tutor vows to continue monitoring the situation. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Welcome to the program here once again on WESN. Let's just tell you this. In July 2021, the then Executive Director of the Water and Sewage Authority, Dr. Lennox Seeley, resigned from his position mysteriously after 4 months in the job. Dr. Seeley had been, prior to that, head of a team which conducted a study of operations at the utility. And he had been given the responsibility to effect a turnaround based on the contents of a report which he had submitted. The shock resignation came on the day after Dr. Seeley had cut short an interview in which he had been engaged with yours truly on some developments having to do with the utility in the period since he had been appointed. When asked about the sudden resignation at the time, the Public Utilities Minister, Marvin Gonzalez, said it was because Dr. Seeley was confronted with the government's position that much anticipated restructuring had not been taken place. Well, there's been some time between then and now. What has happened? What has been happening with restructuring at the Water and Sewage Authority? Minister Gonzalez has agreed to be our guest on this edition of the program to talk exactly about that. Good to see you. Good to have you. Good to have you.
Good morning to your viewers. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
All right. I want to start by going back there as to what transpired when Dr. Seeley left the job, and you'd said it was because the transformation program was not happening in the way that it should happen. And
Yes.
Can you go back to that and talk about that a little bit?
So much has happened since. So let me try and recall the circumstances under which he exited the Water and Sewage Authority. But just to correct what you would have said in your introductory remarks, Dr. Seeley did not hand any report into the government on transformation. It all started off with the government appointing a cabinet subcommittee to look into the operations of the Water and Sewage Authority. And as Minister of Public Utilities, I was asked to chair that subcommittee that the government put in place in 2020. Yeah. The Prime Minister had given the subcommittee 3 months to do its work and to submit a report. We submitted that report. It's dated December 11, 2020. And that report is the report of the Cabinet Subcommittee appointed to review the operations of the Water and Sewage Authority and to determine a strategy for enabling the authority to achieve its mandate. That report was reviewed by the Cabinet, and a decision was taken to lay the entire report, unedited report, in the Parliament so that all citizens and stakeholders can read the findings of the report and the recommendations for transformation of the authority. When the report was laid, it was subject to a discussion at a joint select committee, and witnesses were interviewed and what have you. And the Cabinet had taken a decision following the submission of this report to appoint another Cabinet subcommittee to come up with a transformation plan based on the findings of this report. Because of my involvement in chairing the committee that generated this report, it was thought that another senior cabinet minister should chair the cabinet subcommittee that will look at the transformation and the implementation of the recommendations in this report. So Minister Beckles, as a former Minister of Public Utilities, very experienced, she was asked... Minister Penny Beckles. She chaired that cabinet subcommittee, and a transformation roadmap was developed. Over about a year it took to develop that transformation roadmap. Dr. Lennox Seeley was chairman of the board at that point in time, and his responsibility was to look at that transformation roadmap that was developed by the Cabinet Subcommittee and to come up with a full-scale transformation plan for the authority. So the roadmap was prepared, it was submitted, the government had the opportunity to look at it again, and we gave the framework by which the transformation should occur. Now, I think we also need to remind the population that this transformation process and that roadmap was the subject of 2 or 3 litigation at the Industrial Court, launched by the Public Services...
The PSA.
The PSA, all right? And they asked the court to stop the process because they believed that the process was being followed without, good industrial relations practice, and that no transformation of the Water and Sewage Authority should take place without the recognized unions being properly... exactly. So the matter was fully litigated before the court, and the government won. It was subject again to another attack, and again the government won. But we could not have gone on with the transformation process without this matter being fully ventilated. So the court asked the Cabinet Subcommittee and the board to hold its hand on the process and to allow the court to adjudicate on the matters. So that contributed to some delays on the part of the full implementation of the transformation of the Water and Sewage Authority. So we gave an undertaking that we are not going to implement any restructuring of the authority until the court had the opportunity to look at what the government is actually doing and to determine whether or not the government is breaching industrial relations or sound industrial relations practice with respect to the process that it engaged to transform the utility company. And the court ruled in favor of the government. But unfortunately, it would have contributed to some delays because we had to give the undertaking that we are not going to do certain things without, until the court had the opportunity. Now, Dr. Seeley was then made the executive director. So he was chairman. When he was first appointed, he was just chairman of the board. And then eventually...
And being, heading this team
correct.
For
yes.
Transformation.
Absolutely.
And when that report came in, he was given the opportunity to be the CEO.
Exactly. So he was wearing two caps as the CEO and the chairman of the board and executive director. And this is something that the government would not normally do. I can tell you that the government doesn't like. It's not good or sound corporate governance practice to have someone
as an executive chairman.
As an executive chairman. We don't like that. But in some instances, it might be necessary. And given the mammoth task of transforming the utility agency, we thought that we should make him an executive chairman, empowering him to manage the board and to run some of the operations of the authority. But we did that with certain expectations that the transformation process would have taken place because he would now be responsible for managing the day-to-day operations as well as the managing the board, that he would get all of the necessary resources to push the transformation as quickly as we expected. And as a young minister at the time, I can tell you, Andy, that I had set certain milestones for the transformation. And I found that those milestones were not being met. And Dr. Seeley, unfortunately, was being distracted by the day-to-day operations of the authority. Because I'll tell you this, in all fairness to him, running WASA is a very complex undertaking. And if you're not careful, you can be so subsumed and overwhelmed by the day-to-day avalanche of challenges that you will have to grapple with. It can take you away from creating your strategic focus and direction for the authority, and in this case, the transformation.
And you think that is what?
Of course.
That's what confronted him.
That is what confronted him. In all fairness to him, I can tell you, he was consumed. On a day, almost every day, I would call him and find out how things are going with the transformation.
Because I can tell you what it was about. I was talking with him about a report that he had been personally involved in the disciplining of a worker who was said to have been flouting.
Exactly, and I think my name was called in it, and the PSA tried to pull me into it, saying that it is the minister that made a report on a worker, and Dr. Seeley was doing the actual investigation. And there were clear attempts in the media and by the Public Services Association that the Minister of Public Utilities was somehow involved in this.
Because the way it happened, I mean, I don't want to go back and dwell on it too much, but he left
around that same time
with me. What I'm saying, he left the discussion with me. He said, well, I have to, based on a question I'd asked him, because it was said that he was involved personally in disciplinary action against a worker with something in Chaguaramas. He said, well, I have to talk to the minister. And he came back saying that, well, the minister told me I shouldn't talk about it. Well, and the next day he
let me tell you this. He didn't call me, and he told me about this interview, and that he's not comfortable with the interview. That I think you were asking.
I wasn't. I did.
And I just offered a simple question, a simple advice, that if you're not happy with the interview, then you have every right to discontinue. But I didn't tell him what decision he should make. He told me he was uncomfortable with the interview because it was involved a matter that he was investigating and involved in, and that given the nature of the questioning, it would reveal some aspects of the investigation that he was still
He was
undertaking.
uncomfortable with.
Yeah. So my simple advice to him was, okay, if you agree to the interview, I asked him, I said, did you agree to the interview? He said, yes. Yeah. And I said, well, if you're not happy with the course of the interview and the questions being asked, you're free to discontinue. And it was as simple as that.
Why do you think that the next day he decided, well, he wanted out and he left?
Well, it
How
was,
did that?
you would not believe something, Andy. It was coincidence. It was mere, simple coincidence. Because around that time, a lot of questions were being asked from the minister's office with respect to the transformation process. So the confluence of activities around the transformation, the day-to-day operations of the authority and what have you, he recognized, he asked me if I was, if I'm confident that he was managing the transformation process in the way that I expect and the government expect. And I was brutally honest.
You didn't give him the response that he expected?
No. And I was being brutally honest. I told him that I was not confident that the transformation was taking place in the way that we anticipated, especially having regard to the fact that he was made an executive director. And I gave him the opportunity to determine how he's going to move forward. And he tended
that's the determination he made.
That's correct.
All right, so to jump some hoops here, as we speak on...
It's good to clear. Yeah. I did not want to go into the media at that point in time because there are so much things that were taking place. But I knew that at the appropriate time, I would be able to clarify any issues and perceptions and misconceptions that people may have on this. But this is exactly what happened.
Well, your explanation now helps a great deal, if in my own understanding of what transpired and why it happened in the way that it did. But as we speak on this day in September 2024, how much different is the Water and Sewerage Authority from what it was?
Andy, it is vastly different. I mean, there's so much I can talk about because in preparing for this interview, I went back into my files and to delve into the findings of this report. And reading this report, which was generated in 2020, and what I inherited as Minister of Public Utilities, and the state of the utility company today, it's two complete universe. It's a different universe. And I'll just give you an example.
Sorry.
When I came in, there was a huge backlog of leaks in the authority, averaging 5,000 leaks on WASA's transmission and distribution system.
5,000?
5,000 leaks, contributing to a high level of NRW, non-revenue water, loss of water. That is now down to about 300. And it maintained an average of 300, and sometimes it dropped lower, but it never gets closer to not even 1,000. Just an example of what I'm talking about. The 24/7 percentage of the population that is getting water on a 24/7 basis, when this report was generated, it was 34%. 34%. Today, it is now in the region of 61%.
So that's double, almost double from what it was 2 years ago.
Almost double. And by next week, that figure is going to be revised further, and it is going to be somewhere in the region, I expect, of over 65%. And I will explain why.
Yeah.
The PSIP, which is the Public Sector Investment Program for WASA, that is where the government would put large sums of money so that WASA can undertake capital projects to improve the supply of water, ensure that we expand our wastewater services, ensure that citizens get access to clean, potable water, etc. When this report was generated, WASA's PSIP performance on an annual basis, Andy, was between 15 and 20%. What does that mean? For the citizens listening to this program, it means that if the government allocates $100 million to the Water and Sewerage Authority to upgrade its infrastructure and to improve the supply of water, WASA would only utilize 15 to 20% of that because of poor project management, poor project accounting, delays in dealing with your finances, getting your releases, your procurement process was long and it did not make any sense. And so the authority was only utilizing 15 to 20% of the allocation that the government would make in its PSIP today. Today, that has increased to 90%. And when you talk to people in the authority, they would tell you they have never seen WASA performed at this level. Having worked inside of there for 20 and 25 years, they have never seen WASA performed at that level. In this current fiscal year and in 2023, WASA broke record in terms of its well drilling activities. For the very first time, in 1 year, WASA was able to drill 15 groundwater wells. You know what that means? That's the reason why you now have an average of 61% of the population now getting 24/7 level of service. And then you have the different levels of service that I'll go into. Like, if you're not getting 24/7, you might be on a water schedule of 3 days a week, 2 days a week, or 5 days a week. You have different levels, 6 days, what have you. And then in many communities, under our community water improvement program, we completed over 80 projects. When this report was generated, it told you that under the community water improvement program, the government was allocating sums of money, and they could not have even shown 5 successful projects that were completed. Over the last 2 to 3 years, they were able to complete 80 projects in communities all over Trinidad and Tobago, Andy. And in many communities, people got water for the very first time.
So in those places where, as we speak, people still have issues with getting pipe-borne supplies of water in different pockets in the country.
Pockets, yes.
That's because it just can't be addressed. The challenges there are...
And that is why we put together the community water improvement program, because you have the larger public sector investment program dealing with your upgrade of your plants and putting down your large and replacing large transmission distribution lines and what have you. But we have a problem in Trinidad and Tobago, as we are all familiar with, which is the problem of unregulated developments. And unregulated development, the issue of unregulated development puts a serious strain on your utility infrastructure. Because when people go and build on hills without getting the requisite permission, or they go into development and squatting communities and they put down the development, they don't have water, you don't have electricity. But when you put down your structure, your homes and what have you, then you start to make demand on the utilities to get the service. The distribution system was never designed, in some instances, to get water to some of those hilly terrains or where some of those developments have been located. And if you do not have the necessary investment and financial resources to expand your distribution system to get water into these communities, then you're going to have problems. So the pockets of areas that you're talking about, by and large, are areas where you have unregulated development. When people build their homes on hills, it means that you have to construct booster stations to now boost the supply from the lowest point to the highest point. If you have a porous distribution system, lines that might be outdated and old and what have you, when you put all of that pressure into the line to get water to the highest point by the construction of these booster stations, it creates leaks on your system. And so so people, of course, will blame the utility when they build their homes on hills, etc., when they don't get a supply of water. But oftentimes they don't understand that by constructing homes on hills and some of these terrain, it means that you now have to get additional financial resources to get the water to these points.
But there are some parts of the country where there have been long-standing communities for eons, as people would say, who have not had the best water supply system for as long as these places exist.
You see, I'll tell you what, with TNTech, when you are building your homes on some of these places, TNTech requires that you pay a capital contribution to put the necessary infrastructure to get electricity to those homes. That is a requirement under TNTEC. Unfortunately, it's not the same
with water.
That's correct. It's not the same. That is very unfortunate, and at the appropriate time, we will have to review the Water and Sewerage Authority Act to allow for the necessary capital contribution to be made by developers so that when they are putting the development in some of those places, the capital contribution will go towards putting down the necessary water infrastructure to get water to some of those places. And that's one of the, it's a serious problem. Eh? It's a serious problem affecting the authority, because when people go into those homes and those structures and they don't get the water, then you blame the utility company, not understanding that the appropriate investment was not made to expand the water infrastructure to get to those homes. But over the last 3 years, we were able to complete or construct 15 to 20 booster stations to get water to hilly terrains around the country. Those areas that could not have gotten or did not get a reliable supply of water, booster stations were constructed in strategic areas around the country. Wells were drilled, Freeport, just to name a few, in Aruca, in Five Rivers, in parts of Sangre Grande, in Tobago, 15 wells, and in Granville, Icacos, huge water wells were drilled, and they are now supplying those communities with water. In Palo Seco, in the Palo Seco area, and La Brea, they are now benefiting from an improved supply of water because of the wells that we have drilled in some of these communities. We were able to drill those wells in record time because of some of the structural changes that we made within the authority. And we got the various departments that play a role in project planning and project development, like your procurement department, your legal department, your project and change department. We put together implementation units to bring your finance department, all of them together to work seamlessly so that these projects can be rolled out. So you're saying
without fear of contradiction that the WASA we know today, on this day in September 2024, is significantly different.
Different organization.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about work culture, which is, a burden that the authority has had to carry. And you look at the way the organization is structured. I made a note of something I saw in looking up and doing some of the preparation for this. Mm-hmm. There are 4,828 employees at WASA. 3,043 of them are monthly paid. You have 1,723, and there's an issue about monthly pay as opposed to daily paid. And it says here that there are people who are deemed managers, but the units they manage is just 2 or 3 people.
That's correct.
And so these things also affect the operations
and the output. Yeah, tremendously. Over the last 20-25 years, the issue of workers and how workers are managed within the authority plagued the authority, and by extension, the manner in which the authority executed projects that were designed to improve the supply of water. This Cabinet Subcommittee report identified those issues, and as a matter of fact, I would have seen several other reports before this 2020 report that talked about the need to restructure the human resource component of the authority, and the fact that the authority, compared to other utility companies around the world, is grossly overstaffed.
Yeah, because I just call one name, a man named Dion Abdul. He's just one of those who's been in a management position for a while, but the whole team, it seemed, a couple of years ago, each of them had an opportunity or a spell as acting CEO.
Yes.
And it didn't seem to,
right. So what
to flip the switch at all.
Right. So one of the things that we observed in the Cabinet Subcommittee report is that a lot of the positions in the authority were not sanctioned by the Cabinet. So, and I can tell you, between 2010 to 2015, a lot of new positions were created, especially on the management level. And these positions never had the sanction of the CPO's office.
So who created them?
How
were they created?
The board. The board created them without getting the sanction of the line ministry and without getting the sanction of the Office of the Chief Personnel Office.
Yeah, because there's a culture that seems to have
it
spanned
ballooned and
different
spanned different administration. Unfortunately. And a lot of these positions were created by politicians to give their friends and their supporters job opportunities within the authority. Let's be honest about that.
And this is politicians across the board.
Across the board.
Not
Across the board.
specific to any particular
This
administration.
cabinet subcommittee report, Andy, if you just allow me to,
Yeah.
it is one of the, it is brutally honest, because that is my nature. Because I wanted to be very straightforward with the population on the state of the Water and Sewage Authority as it was then. And it said that the subcommittee has concluded that the dysfunctions inherent in WASA are so deeply entrenched that in its current form, the organization is incapable of effectively satisfying customer demands and the state's mandate. Continuation of the current model will therefore generate further decline and exacerbate the downward spiral in all aspects of the authority. And then there is a part that talked about, right, in numerous instances and over many decades. And when we talk about decades, we're talking about decades, spanning both political organizations. And this is a cabinet subcommittee report that comprised of cabinet ministers. And this is the findings of the report. In numerous instances and over many decades, efficiency was sacrificed for, inter alia, political patronage. And management accountability exchanged for industrial stability, resulting in an organization in which there is little correlation between the contents of collective agreements and the realities of providing a reliable service to the national population at an affordable, acceptable cost to the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago.
So industrial peace would put on sort of a higher pedestal
of course,
than management.
And political patronage. So the unions were grossly involved in the management of the authority. As a matter of fact, the management and the executive leadership of WASA could not have done anything unless they get the sign-off of the unions. And that is untenable for any organization. I'm not saying that the union does not, or the unions do not have a role in the management, but managers ought not, and their discretion ought not to be impinged by unions. It's wrong. The balance, you need to have a balance. And what we saw at that point in time and what we inherited was that we had executive leadership of the authority that was literally held to ransom by the unions involved in the organization.
You have two unions.
Three. So you have the PSA, NUGFW, which is the daily paid workers, the PSA representing the monthly paid, and then you have the union representing the security services. So it's three unions.
Wow.
You understand? Yes, 3 units. It's a very difficult place. But I can tell you, the climate in the organization is far better.
Now?
No.
Although the PSA is still saying that it is proposing to challenge whatever attempts that are continuing to be made to address
so this is what happened.
And so on.
So the new leadership was announced, which is part of the transformation plan. The transformation dealt with different aspects of the operations of WASO. So it first started with the leadership, which is one announced recently, and all of the other projects and interventions that we have made to improve the supply of water, they are all components of the transformation plan. So the announcement of the executive leadership of the authority is one component. The other components that I've talked about, reduction in leaks, making necessary interventions in the rolling out of projects all over, the improvement in its PSIP performance, the reduction of leaks, all of these things. And then we launched the report also called for the introduction of technologies to improve the supply of water, to improve service delivery, reducing NRW, non-revenue water. We launched 2 months ago or 3 months ago a modern operational control center. It's a large space where you can now manage WASA's distribution network remotely, whenever your pump goes down, you'll be able to see, you can make the appropriate interventions without persons having to complain that they don't have water for months and before it is finally detected. And that is because you had an absence of technology managing the transmission and distribution network. We commissioned this new center, and under the IDB loan program, we are deploying a lot of sensors and data loggers and telemetric devices to manage a lot of WASA's operation remotely and digitally. You're now getting data with respect to the amount of water being produced, the demands in certain areas, when you are falling short of those demands, when you don't meet those demands, the type of interventions that we are making. In 6 weeks' time, we are going to roll out a modern app where you can report leaks and your water trucking services using an app, and you'll be able to track the progress of these reports on a daily basis as a customer. All of these things are happening at this point in time. But coming back to the report, dealing with the restructuring of the executive leadership, I would have told the country that WASA has a leadership structure of 421 managers. I reported that, and that was
I saw that.
Yeah, and that was the findings of that report. And the 421 managers included executive managers and non-executive managers. But it's a total of 421 managers. The cabinet decided that whilst we understand the whole issue of the overstaffing of the authority by 2,500 workers and what have you, that it is the role and the responsibility of the leadership of the authority to address those deficiencies, that the government and the cabinet should not go into dealing with what managers and executive managers should really be dealing with. So
it's a cabinet position to hand that kind of prerogative to the
absolutely,
leadership.
That is it.
What explains, though, the report which said that the new CEO will be, albeit another CARICOM member state citizen? How, to the best of your knowledge, as to probably feedback for that, what has that been like? I mean, how has that been taken by workers?
I received a number of messages from stakeholders locally and regionally and internationally, expressing admiration and support for the appointment of this CEO, because he happens to be someone that is well known in the water sector in the region and internationally. I attended 2 regional conferences on water in Bahamas and the other in Guyana, and coincidentally I crossed paths with him, and he would have made several contributions at these seminars, and he's well.
So it is on that basis you coming into contact with him and coming into
just brief contact. Yeah. But I
mean, but that was before the
before.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
To what extent those interactions with him what maybe your report back to the cabinet about, let's put it this way: I found somebody. Yeah, I found someone.
So, all right. So the board had, they informed me after the process that they had 2 good candidates that did make the cut for CEO, and I told them to rank them. So they engaged another process with both candidates to determine who they should go with, because the board couldn't identify which was the best out of the 2, and so the first candidate won it out by the board, and the board recommended that the first candidate should be given the offer to be appointed as CEO, which is the guy from Africa. So after that, you have to go engage a process of, approaching the Human Resource Advisory Committee of the Cabinet that makes determination for wages and salaries.
So it's not an absolutely done deal yet. This is still.
Oh no. So no. I'm just telling you what transpired at the first candidate.
Right. Okay.
All right. And so that process took some time, and by the time the HRAC approved the salaries for the position of CEO, unfortunately, the candidate that was ranked number 1 passed away. So it was left with the candidate from Barbados, the St. Kitts Born National.
Are you, as the minister, or is the cabinet sort of preparing for a blowback on that from the union and workers?
Absolutely not, because the executive leadership of the authority is the sole domain for the board and the Ministry of Public Utilities. That the executive leadership falls outside of the bargaining unit of the PSC and all of the unions. So we didn't expect any blowback. I honestly did not expect any blowback, especially if you're getting a candidate that is coming in to lead the authority with that kind of credibility and that kind of experience. That the post was advertised locally, regionally, and internationally, and persons within the authority in Trinidad and Tobago, all over the world, had the opportunity to apply. It is not that you went outside of WASA looking for someone. Everyone had the opportunity, and a lot of people within the authority applied for the position. So it is competitive, and the best candidate won out at the end of the day.
Yeah,
but so far, I can tell you, persons were quite comfortable with it, because the CEO is not Trinidadian, but if you look at the rest of the executive leadership, most of them comprise of senior executives within the Water and Sewage Authority. Yeah. So you have a good blend of experienced persons within the authority, some external persons, and with a CEO coming in with international experience to lead the team.
And I'm not going to call his name, but a couple of days ago I got to find out that a buddy from my neck of the woods, which is Louis Barros, he used to be at Petrotrin. He's now part of the executive leadership team, and I wish him luck. Yeah.
Do you know of him?
We grew up together.
He's a good candidate. I don't know him personally, but I read his background and his experience, and I am also told that he is going to add some good value given his experience. To the authority, and it shows, Andy. I don't know. People may not believe, because there's an inclination to believe that politicians have their hands in all of these things. I can tell you, the way WASA was managed under my tenure, I allow the board to lead. I take advice from time to time from them, from the leadership. I offer my perspectives, and because of that, it has created an harmonious kind of environment within the authority. Of course, you can't get everybody to be satisfied, because people have their own agendas and what have you. But if you look at the fruits that that bearing out at this point in time, and the amount of communities getting a supply of water, communities that never had a supply of water for decades, and can now attest to an improvement in the supply of water, it shows then that you have a utility company that is on the march towards full-scale transformation, and with the new leadership coming on board, which would include persons with international experience, WASA is in a far better place compared to what it was 5 years ago.
Just in the time we have a couple of minutes, let me just ask you then about a couple of the other utilities, we'll say TNTech, if you had to make a comparison between WASA and TNTech in terms of delivery according to what is required.
All right, so you look at delivery based on, in my view, your financial performance, how you're satisfying your customers, how you are making use of your capital investment projects, and what have you. So if you have to look at TNTech, TNTech has been utilizing its capital projects or program to the tune of 100%. It has been satisfying the RIC's thresholds for its performance. It has exceeded those indices almost every year. It continues to make relevant investment in climate resilient infrastructure all over the country, and the culture inside of TNTech is vastly different from WASA. And why? Because the leadership of the organization is allowed to lead, while they engage in discussions with the union. So the collaboration between the leadership of the commission and the union, the OWTU, representing most of the workers of the commission, it's a healthy relationship, but the leadership and the management is allowed to lead, whilst complying and adhering to good industrial relations practices, etc. So TNTech is in a very sound position, but of course it requires a rate review, because it is the money that it is collecting from its rates is not sufficient to fund its operation. And we, time and time again, the RIC and all of these independent organizations, they have been calling for a rate review. And if we get a rate review at any point in time, customers can see, an improvement, further improvements in its operation. But without a rate review, the government will continue to have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to allow the utility company to operate efficiently. TSTT, let me tell you about TSTT. TSTT, as you know, would have also gone through its own version of restructuring. Unfortunately, some persons were, paid, packages to be separated from the organization. TSTT was making huge losses to the tune of millions of dollars. Coming out of the restructuring, TSTT is now posting huge profits. And recently, they posted significant millions of dollars in profits, and it is on the trajectory to continue to be very profitable. All right?
Yeah, I think, but there seems to be a sort of, it's confusion in some people's minds with what is TSTT, because you think you're dealing with TSTT and you have a number to call, and when you call that number, it's Amplia or it's some other name people giving you.
Well, they have other subsidiaries like Amplia and some of these things, but they are all part of the umbrella body of TSTT, but they are independent companies under that is owned by the organization. So there shouldn't really be no sense of confusion. They are subsidiary companies, they have their own board, they have their own management level. So when you call Amplia, you're not expected to get, Bmobile or TSTT. So right. They all operate as independent subsidiaries owned by the telecommunication services of Trinidad and Tobago.
But there's an extent to which, at least how I look at it, is that there should be more sort of public discussion with that.
So that the people can be informed.
Understand.
I take that point. I take that point. TT Post, it's also showing significant improvements in its revenue situation. It is expanding its courier services to other private organizations, government agencies, and recently it is offering services to the U.S. Embassy. And as a result of that, you're seeing a dramatic improvement in the amount of money that it is collecting and reducing its reliance on government subvention. So TT Post is also doing quite well. So generally, the state of the utilities is very stable. WASA is showing significant signs of improvement. Of course, there are areas that they need to do better in terms of its collection and its financial performance so that it can reduce its dependence on government revenue. But that can only be done when operational expenses and expenditure is controlled, and then you have an improvement in your collections.
And part of that has to do, does it, with the ratio of people employed as managers?
You're spending too much money. At international benchmarks, your wage bill is almost $1 billion, and you're collecting an average of $800 million annually. So even with your collections of $800 million annually, you cannot even satisfy your wage bill. So that's a very difficult scenario that must be addressed at some point.
I see in some of the notes that I was looking up, some of the information about this is that the monthly paid people in WASA make between $20,000 and $40,000, $40K a month, and the monthly paid bill a month is like $5 million.
Yes, so it's something that we have to address, and the new executive leadership will be called upon to address. This is something that they have to address, and the cabinet has decided, listen, some of these problems are deep in the bowels of the organization, and it is not the role of the cabinet to go down there and manage for a board and for the leadership. So let us start by restructuring the leadership of the organization, streamlining it, getting it fit for purpose, and the leadership will be charged with the responsibility for fully implementing the transformation plan. Let me show you something. I hope I have some time. Ganga Singh, when he was Minister of Public Utilities under the UNC government, he went to the IDB and got 2 loans to expand wastewater services. And part of the loan conditionality is that you restructure the Water and Sewage Authority. And he submitted a restructuring plan to reduce the staff at the authority by 2,400 workers. There was no involvement of the unions. And this was a signed undertaking by the UNC government to reduce the staff composition at the Water and Sewage Authority by 2,400 because it was part of the loan conditionality to get access to the loan arrangement. When the loan was signed, about 900 workers participated in a VSEP. So they had a VSEP program first to start reducing the amount of staff within the authority down to 2,400. And 900 workers participated in the VSEP. So you'd expect there to be about a reduction in staff from 4,008 to maybe 3,008 or something, maybe close to about 1,000. And what was interesting was that 900 staff participated in the VSEP in 2014, and by 2015, it ballooned back up to 5,000.
So you're talking about in the partnership government as opposed to, because you were saying UNC and I was thinking maybe the government under Pandey.
No.
I think he was in
the partnership government. Right, okay. So that occurred in 2013 to 2014. And the documents are here. I mean, I work with the documents. Yeah. And they made the pledge to the IDB that we need to restructure the organization, we need to reduce staff, and they put together that plan to the IDB, which was approved to reduce staff by 2,500. And when that was done, they got access to the loan. They engaged the VSEP program. 900 workers participated in the VSEP. You would have expected after that to see a reduction in your wage bill, but it never happened because as workers exited the organization,
others came in at different levels.
Yeah.
And you are reported as saying here, we are seeking to reduce that by 40 to 50%. This is in 2022. You
That's
said
the executive leadership.
Yeah, okay.
That's, yes. So the executive leadership.
426 managers.
Yes, to reduce that by 40 to 50%, which is what is in train right now.
You in train?
That is what is in train right now.
Okay.
You understand?
You mean that process to
the
do
process,
that?
yes. So the first level is the executive leadership with the CEO and the other directors. And right after that, last week, some further positions came out in the newspapers that are being advertised to invite persons from within the authority and outside to fill other positions. So they are going deeper now into the bargaining units, because out of the 421 managers, quite a significant portion of these managers fall within the bargaining unit of the Public Services Authority. So now that we have completed filling the executive leadership, and as we go deeper into the management of the organization, then the appropriate consultation will now have to take place with the PSA, as some of their members can now be impacted by the implementation of the restructuring of the management of the authority.
So in your sense, Minister, the work on getting WASA to be where it is it, have you gotten to the mountaintop and you're coming down now, where it's at?
I think we are at the peak of the mountaintop. We're at a very sensitive stage. And when that new leadership comes on board on the 1st of November, they will now be charged with responsibility for continuing the restructuring deep within the organization, and that perhaps in the next 2 to 3 years, once that is followed through, the population will now have a transformed utility. Because it's large-scale transformation you're talking about. It is not only going to impact workers and your HR structure and getting things properly structured and getting some of these contract positions that have not been renewed, properly renewed and filled, so that persons cannot be on a month-to-month basis, being employed on a month-to-month basis for years, 10, 15 years. Some of these monthly paid workers are working on a month-to-month contract. Some of these daily paid workers, they don't know, their elevation within the authority, they can't see, because all of these positions have not been sanctioned, and they're operating on a kind of vice kind of arrangement. So with this new structure and with this implementation strategy that we are going to that we are rolling out, all of these anomalies should be dealt with, and workers will not have the day-to-day challenges that they have with respect to their future within the organization and what have you. And by that, you would see a reduction in your operational expenditure, all right? And the monies that you collect now from your rates can now be put towards improving your levels of service and as well paying your workers better wages and better salaries as opposed to having to rely on the Ministry of Finance to do some of these daily things.
If it were up to you, so the next elections are held, you hold on to your seat. Is it too much to wonder whether, to what extent you would prefer to remain there and continue the job, or you want to try a hand at the ministry?
That is a very, very good question because, to be honest with you, I keep posing that question silently within myself. So it's a very good question. Now, because of the improvement that we have made in the operations of WASA, the work of the Cabinet Subcommittee, the Strategic Action Plan for Water Improvement, the IDB loan program that we have in train that is doing so well, the restructuring of the management of the authority and what have you, and the challenges faced by the authority and the water sector as a result of climate change and what have you. I would like to see a lot of these work and projects materialized so that the issue of water and the challenges that some communities face for not having a reliable supply of water can be completely wiped out, and that citizens can witness that day when you have a complete turnaround of the water sector, a sector that people believe is not possible to turn around, or a utility company that persons be resigned, into hopelessness and not believing that would ever turn around. I long for the day, and I am seeing it. It is happening already when citizens, the vast majority of citizens, as cynical as we are, can have a water utility company that we can say is responsive to our concerns and our needs. And I would love to be part of it. Because if we do not push through with some of these things that we are making, with the impact of climate change on our population and the entire world, if we change course and we change direction, the implications of doing so will be very dire on our population, and it can have intractable and long-term implication for the economic development of Trinidad and Tobago and the lives of citizens.
What is your take, or what is the sense that you have about the decision you made to get involved in politics? Your party won the election, you won your seat, and you became a cabinet minister, and you're looking forward to continuing to do that kind of work. Is there any point on the journey thus far that you had second thoughts about?
Yeah, there are some parts, and very seldom though, not much. You go through some challenges in trying to get the necessary resources to push the work that you would like to push. Sometimes I'm very daunted or very disappointed in the behavior and the mindset of some of our citizens and some of our employees. You would expect that once you're in a job, you would come out to work on a daily basis and give it your best shot, especially when you're operating the utility sector, where what you do can and will have an impact on the lives of ordinary citizens. That if you are called in the morning saying that a community is out of water, and you're told that a community is out of water for weeks or months or days, that you will be spurred into action from a humanitarian perspective to ensure that that community get a supply of water. And when you see sometimes some people not being bothered by persons suffering for not having the basic amenities of life, I ask myself, what did we do as a nation to produce some citizens like that and some employees like that? That is very disappointing, because I believe as a country, if we can fire on 60 to 80% of our pistons, where every citizen carries the responsibility of citizenship and be dedicated towards improving the lives of our country and moving the development of our country forward, regardless of race, regardless of creed, religion, color, class. And we see Trinidad and Tobago, I think we can do so well together as a country. And from time to time, as a politician coming into this job, thinking that the vast majority of our citizens are like-minded to that extent, and realizing it is not necessarily so, that you will have persons undermining the work that you are doing simply because they don't support you from a political level, a racial level, where you're from, I find that to be very disappointing. And those are some of the, particularly that, sometimes will cause me some disquiet. But apart from that, I love public service, and I love to see the things that we are doing improving lives. And even if it's one home or one community, I don't feel as though that my work is in vain. And that is the part of public service I enjoy.
And as we'll come back some other time, and we'll talk about the politics.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. It's been you've been, well, better than I thought you would be. much more comfortable with dealing with the issues, and I think are critical in these respects. So we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Public Utilities Minister Marvin Gonzalez, Member of Parliament for
Lopino Bonner
West, which is where I live.
That's correct.
In that area. This has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
WESN.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Hot spell warning issued for Trinidad and Tobago. TKR batsmen struggle against Falcons in CPL clash. Cricket legends launch Go Electric TT to tackle climate change. And tutor slams premature return of St. George's College amid flooding and safety concerns. Now for the details. Trinidad and Tobago is under a hot spell watch at the yellow level with daily temperature